We have had a wonderful day of seeing new collaborations for the first time, seeing new integrations into frameworks that we've been using for a very long time, deeper partnerships through the React Foundation. There's been so much collaboration, it's been amazing. But we know that you also like to see a little bit of drama. And so we're going to take this collaboration and see if we can dress it up with a little bit of competition. Oh, yes. Here we go. Leading a colossal panel with a size of 8 magnificent, fabulous framework developers that you know and love, all chasing that blazing fastness, answering the one question on everyone's mind: which framework will ultimately win the framework wars? Welcome to Framework Fight Night. Please welcome your first fighter, the blue-collar coder, Jack Herrington!
Hey, before you leave, can everybody give a big round of applause for Michael? He's been doing a fantastic job. Come on, seriously. Yes! Absolutely. Good work, Michael. I'm not actually a fighter. I am the guy emceeing the fight. So, all right, let's bring out my contestants. All right. Michael, who's going to represent Michał, who's going to represent the Rock framework. Josh Story for Next.js. Tanner Linsley for TanStack. Kent C. Dodds for Remix. The man. Peter for Redwood, you just saw him a couple minutes ago. Devon for Expo. And Devon for Adobe. So come on up. All right, guys. So we're going to do a little bit of a formal thing for the beginning, and then we're just going to kind of get into it. So I'm just going to give each one of you about 2 minutes, minus you, Tanner, because you just had 10 minutes.
Agreed.
To just kind of give us an intro. Tell us, kind of give us a sales pitch. Like, why should we use your framework? Why is your framework the framework of the future?
So I'm representing Rock, which is React Native framework. We're trying to do 2 things right. So not all of the things. First is getting these older React Native community CLI apps on the newest tooling so they can leverage some local and remote caching, which is especially helpful with bigger teams. And the second thing is getting the native applications, so iOS and Android apps, into the React Native realm. So with our Rock Brownfield feature, we allow them to simply import one file and then just instantiate React Native in their iOS or Android app.
That's awesome. All right. Josh?
Hi, everyone. I'm Josh. I did not come prepared to fight, but I'm on the Next.js team at Vercel. And
there you go.
Nice.
Guillermo?
Hopefully. Some of you all that deep. So Next has been around for a while. So some folks probably are aware of what it is, but it was started with principles that were very similar to what React cares about, which is allowing people to build the best user experiences easily. Back when it began, server-side rendering was sort of not super common, and sort of Jamstack SSG was kind of like coming into sort of vogue, and the framework kind of adopted that mindset. But sort of picking a specific implementation or technology is not super important. What's important is can people ship fast? Can they understand? Can new coders sort of come into sort of the community and be productive and focus on what's important, like building the product? And in 2022, started working on a new version of Next.js that we later shipped as like an incremental upgrade called App Router. And hopefully some of you have heard of that or used it or tried it. And this is the React Server Components sort of implementation that's been stable for a few years now. I guess to answer the question of like why you might be excited about using in the future, the journey's not over. There's something that's sort of essential in any React project, and that's composition. And today there are still some places where there's some hard cliffs. You have to think about whether my site's a static site, it's a dynamic site. And so the stuff that we're working on now, and actually we have a conference in 2 weeks if you all want to tune into some announcements. I'm going to not try to spoil too much of it right now. We're going to announce some interesting stuff around that and making it so that sort of these features that have been in R&D for a while, like partial pre-rendering, we can sort of share a progress update there and hopefully bring it to more users. So that's my bit.
Awesome. Kent?
Oh yeah, sorry. I was just waiting for Tanner's. So I think that the framework of the future is React. And that's what, honestly, the interesting thing that I've observed is that the frameworks, because React is doing so much more for us now, the frameworks are really converging and they really look similar now. So for my bit, I think probably the most compelling reason to use React Router is if you're already using it, which a lot of you are, you can continue to use it and take advantage of all the latest features of React. For those who are looking for a new framework, you're starting a new project, you cannot make a wrong choice. All of these frameworks are fabulous. For React Router in particular, I really appreciate the dedication of the team. It has a lot of investment from Shopify. I actually am probably unique up here in that I've only made 2 or 3 commits to the framework that I'm representing. So I'm just here representing the hard work from Ryan Florence and Michael Jackson, as well as the rest of the team. And all of the stuff that they have done. So I'm just happy to be here, and I feel really, really good about where we are from a framework perspective now. And I just think it's really important for frameworks to take care of their users, and I think that React Router has proven to do that over the last decade.
Yeah, absolutely. Peter?
I'm not going to tell you to use my framework, because you're already using it. If you're using V, TypeScript, and React, using Redwood, there's nothing to learn. You already know what we built. It's lightweight, it's composable, it's server first. There's no magic, no type generation. Command click on a function, you go to where it goes. It's understandable, it's traceable. That's
all right. There you go.
Cool.
Short to the point. Nice. All right. Evan?
Yeah. So I work on Expo Router, universal React framework, and we really believe in just the beauty and the optimization of the mobile form factor and how much that resonates with real people. And obviously, there's just so many incredible things about the web. The distribution is incredible. We just spent 15 minutes stumbling through test flight backstage, and the web has no such issues. And so how can we bring the best of the web to these clearly incredible devices where you have just haptics and gestures and such thoughtful, careful design. And we're really happy with what we built here. Starting with React, bring JavaScript and React over to native, but now we have file-based routing, server actions, API routes, environment variables, one-click deployments. So there's just so much good stuff that the web community has innovated, and it's incredible to bring it over to these new spaces, these new form factors. So highly recommend you guys try it, check it out, can build an Expo website, and get started instantly.
Awesome. Devon?
Well, I guess I'm sort of the odd one out here since I don't really represent a framework per se. Parcel is just a bundler. So I guess if you have an existing client app and you want to try out server components, for example, and you don't really want to migrate anything, or you don't want to add SSR, you just want to like I showed in my talk, embed some server components into your app and try it out. A bundler like Parcel is an easy way to do that. Also, I guess. I really like what the React Router team is doing actually with where you can actually swap between different bundlers in React Router's data mode, which is really cool. So if you have bundler specific plugins or types of things like that you want to use with React Router, you can actually do that. So that's super cool. Yeah.
That's great. So is the framework of the future, we have an amazing situation here because we have folks that represent both web and native. And is that framework of the future, and React can do that, is that framework of the future a framework that spans across web and native? And I'm just going to throw it to anybody who just wants to jump in on that.
Yes.
So
It already does.
Okay.
React.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, if you think about React as the framework of the future. I mean, I think when people think frameworks nowadays, they think about the stuff that's on top of it, like the routing and all the mechanics that are on top of React to get to where like a full app.
Oh, meta
system.
framework.
A meta framework. Okay, there you go. What is the meta framework in the future? And is it both React and React Native?
Yeah, well, the web is just extremely thoughtful about things. We see this especially on like the first day in that React keynote and introducing like the activity API. We have primitives sort of like this on native with like view controllers and fragments, but there's clearly something there, and the React team goes and creates a very thoughtful API that just works everywhere. So I think we will continue to bind and sort of meet in the middle here. And it's really exciting because I look at things like activity and the view transitions, and it's clear how you can start to build things that previously you would only see in a native app in the browser, and you get that distribution. But at the same time, then you have like liquid glass and transitioning through HDR happening on iOS. So like the bar keeps moving, but we do see these incredible like things transition downstream, and overall it just meets in the middle, and it looks fantastic. So, yeah.
All right. Anyone else want to pitch in on that? All right. How about RSCs? What's some take on RSCs?
They're neat.
They're neat. Nice. Okay. Are they required? Like, do you think a meta framework can't be a meta framework without RSC?
I think for React, yeah, probably.
Yeah?
One of the beautiful things about React is that it has kind of eaten up the use cases that we have had in frameworks and solved some of these problems. And if you don't support that, then you're only supporting part of the ecosystem, which I think, I'm speaking from the perspective of a web developer, but yeah, I feel like not supporting that is kind of shutting off a big portion of the ecosystem. And that's, I mean, is anything required? You could probably get users without support for RSCs. It's easy for me to say this now that React Router has RSC support. But I do think that it's, as far as framework of the future for React, it feels like a requirement to me.
I think that obviously, like, I don't believe in absolutes, so there's certainly people with situations that don't need it or don't benefit from it. But one dimension that is kind of interesting is that your users are probably not close to your data, and being able to have a programming model where you can choose where you want to run certain kinds of compute, unless you can somehow magically make sure there's never serial data dependencies, having one query resolve and then lead into a second query, if that's right next to your data store, that's always going to be better than having to go across the world and do that a few times. And so there's just like structural benefits, not that it's necessary in all cases, or certain apps that are super localized or whatever, but having the ability to make that choice is really nice. And then another thing is that when you constrain like what you can do, it allows frameworks to optimize more. And so it's maybe frustrating that you can't use certain things like, I don't know, use state in a server component. If you didn't think about it too hard, you might think like, oh, well, why can't I do it? I don't want to think about like, what does it mean to be a server component versus a client component? But if we did allow that, then we have to figure out how to do updates over the network, and what's that really serving? So, in the design of server components, sort of as part of like the React architecture as a whole, you pick your limitations so that the tools that people build with them can be even more powerful. And hopefully the choices that you're making are the right ones for the most people in the most situations. And I think that basically, we might all have slightly different takes, but largely I think there's a lot of alignment.
Yeah, I think something that we haven't seen a lot yet, but I'm looking forward to seeing, is like more libraries like just on NPM that are server components, right? Like, now that more frameworks are going to be supporting server components, I think this is going to be possible. So that maybe you'll have like authentication libraries or like form validation libraries or these kind of things to just get componentized now, and they can be used in any framework. And I think that's what's really powerful about server components.
It would be great to see something like shared CN for functionality.
Yeah, right.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Or features.
Well, I hate to bring the A word into this, but AI, how's that going to fit into into the
I thought you
meta
were gonna say
framework
something
space.
else.
Do we expect to see meta frameworks have features in it that make writing AI apps easier? Or do you see AI as being a thing where we write frameworks in a way that makes it easier for AI to write them? Or are some of the all the above?
Oh, for sure, it's all the above, in my opinion. I think, like, at this point, if you're building a framework, you really need to be considering how easy, structuring things in such a way, like co-location helps a lot with AI, right? This is one of the reasons why AI is so good at Tailwind, because it's all co-located right there. So, like, thinking about the way that you design your API so things can be co-located amongst other things, and then as far as like making a framework that it makes it easy for you to use AI, I'm not really sure I see that as like a framework feature, but I definitely do see like publishing an NPM package that handles both the server and client aspects, and you just render a component and boom, now you got whatever.
a chat app.
Yeah, you got it, yeah.
Good to go.
Thing like that.
More thoughts?
Yeah, so I think there's obviously sort of a quality of React apps where you can locally reason is obviously super beneficial. I think that was probably mentioned in the keynote too. And I imagine that all of our frameworks here essentially preserve that because we're all React frameworks. And the less there's like spooky action at a distance, the easier I think it'll be for like tools to write sort of what you would otherwise write yourself as a software engineer building with these tools. I do want to call out one thing though that I think is kind of interesting. It wasn't that long ago that you couldn't SSR and stream. Like that was just, I mean, you could like obviously stream the bytes to the browser, but like there wasn't this concept of like progressively rendering like a React app from the server. And now we have a sort of plethora of apps where you might be streaming for 20 minutes because there's tokens being spit out of a LLM model. And so it was sort of probably fortuitous that it happened to line up time-wise where the apps came after the capability did. But that's carrying a lot of weight, and maybe we don't think about it too much because it just was already there and ready to go. But it would be much harder to do that, at least from the server, if we were stuck in the days where had to buffer everything until you had finished the render and then you sent it to the browser.
So streaming sounds like table stakes for this.
It kind of feels like it.
Right. Yeah. Every framework has to support it.
I mean, I won't say anything so, but
certainly. I think Next support, obviously supports it. I know TanStack does. All right. How about AI writing frameworks? I mean, the co-location in that, it's obviously a big word, but like having all the code in essentially one file, very close, the AI can kind of parse through it. Are there other things that we can do to help AI write to our frameworks, write for our meta frameworks?
Yeah, so I think it's if it's easy for humans, it's probably easy for LLMs as well, right? Stuff like composition and collocation that works. Other than that, from the framework perspective, we can write some helpers toolings. There is like plethora of different ways you can, call to an emulator or a device. And having a helper library that you can just expose to LLM so it can just call it and call it a day, it's gonna be easier for it than figure out how to do it on its own. It's gonna figure it out. It's gonna just burn more tokens. So yeah, to me, it's if it's easy for a developer, it's gonna be easier for LLM. And there is also like a level of seniority to that. So we have junior, we have regular, seniors developers, and they're using different tools. So sometimes we may get away with logging our stuff in the console. So our LLM can just cross-reference in the terminal and see. So we may think that we need console login in our frameworks, but then someone figures out MCP to Chrome DevTools,
yeah.
and you're like, oh, now I'm like regular senior developer running this React DevTools, and I can read from that.
I mean, it's funny you bring up MCP because that would be, oh, sorry.
Oh, no, next.
Oh, I was going to say, I mean, that would be another thing we'd talk about in terms of future-facing features, right? Having our apps support MCP, native apps supporting MCP, now that Apple's working in that space, but also MCP endpoints. Is that something you see in Meta framework? Something is going to come out of the box? What do we see in that space?
Next is exploring it. Right now focused on developer experience. Like, we go through a breaking change. How do you kind of contextualize? Like, code mods are great, but like at some point there's sometimes situations that can't be code modded, or maybe you didn't even know to run it. But you can have sort of some interface with the framework to understand like its state or its behavior, or some incompatibility that you might have either newly introduced or it was there before you made an upgrade to a new version. So that's kind of how the next team is currently exploring it. I don't know if there'll be more. I'm sure there will be more. But that's actively being invested in right now.
Kent, what's your take?
Yeah,
you're all over this.
So many things.
Yeah, right?
So in particular, like we talked about, now you can make a chatbot with an RSC component. I actually think that we're all used to adding chatbots to our applications, and now the chatbot is actually adding our application. So we're getting the opposite experience, and that's all coming through MCP UI. Currently, OpenAI's implementation has something custom, but they're working together to make that cohesive. And right now, using MCP UI, like it's possible. I'm actually flying to Toronto tomorrow to go talk at Remix Jam about MCP UI with React Router. And that experience is fine, but it could be much improved, and I think that there's room for frameworks to support that. This is a big bet that I'm making personally on my career, but if it does play out to be the case, then I think that every one of these frameworks will want to have some affordances for MCP and like serving your app right into that chat experience, whether it be ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude or whatever. That will be an important part of the future for React frameworks or any web framework.
Does this bring back into play the whole micro front end thing? I mean, essentially, an MCP endpoint delivers MFEs back. Yeah?
I don't know enough about micro front ends.
Okay, that's fine.
I have an opinion.
It's just terminology, right? It's all the same thing. All right. Any more ideas on MCP? Are you guys, who's engaging with MCP in your frameworks? Okay, fair enough. Yeah, I added an MCP starter to TanStack start. Evan, you?
Yeah, I mean, we maintain an app called Expo Go, which is sort of like a browser for prototyping. And in the same way that you might want like an MCP just built into Chrome to help you interact with it, we're exploring just doing the same thing with Expo Go. So, understand like what's on the screen, help you navigate, what the current sort of like URL is in memory.
Okay, so like a debugging tool?
Yeah, like just integrate directly with it and just see like how far you can push the agentic process. I mean, the main thing we found is that you just really want to be like careful with your context window, like be really sensitive with what you'll expose to it. Like image models can, essentially poison it in like multiple different directions. So you'll be like, does the thing render? And it'll be like, start just describing like the status bar, and then it'll like get confused, little pieces like that.
I know last year, your talk was one of the highlights here.
It really
was. Yeah,
nice.
around generative UI. It was fascinating. So is that something that you see being a standard part of Expo? Where's that going?
Yeah. I mean, kind of to Josh's point, like streaming wasn't big. Now streaming is just built into everything. So we have all these streaming primitives, and we found that that's just been huge for a number of, like the Mistral app is an Expo app. I think it's hard to name an AI app right now. I guess it's not that hard. That isn't like fully Expo, but like even the top dev tools, like in the top 10, I think 4 out of 10 are Expo tools, and a lot of them are just helping you build Expo apps. So more so than like Expo adding AI, we want to be a really good tool for helping others build AI tools,
right?
But like very recursively, because when I just moved to San Francisco, when I talk to people, no matter who it is, everyone is trying to build something agentic, and so downstream of that, they're going to reach for a dev tool like Expo. It needs to even something as simple as like the masked shimmering text effect when it's like thinking, like that was slightly harder than it needed to be, and we found that was like everyone was stubbing their toe on it. So Yeah, we're helping like in basically any way we can to make it just a machine that builds machines.
Okay. Agents seem kind of murky. Like, is there anyone who wants to like kind of talk about solidifying for folks what agents mean in terms of like us developing agents for customers on these meta frameworks? How's that going to work?
I nominate Ken to describe that.
Yeah, so you're asking for a definition of agent?
Well, just like obviously folks think about like the product and all that, like, it going off and doing things on its own. Is that something that like running jobs and tasks, is that going to be a critical part of a meta framework? Is that just something the back end's going to
certainly it's going to be a back end thing. Here's the way that I see that going. Let's say that you're a bank and you're considering like opening up your capabilities to an agent. That's terrifying, right?
Okay.
An agent that you don't control, like, okay, we're going to make an MCP server for transactions, and now like you have no control over that experience. So what if instead, like, having an agent that you build yourself and you get to control that experience, like, yeah, maybe that's okay. I get to manage that. And so what you do is you make an agent, and then you turn that into an MCP server and you expose a chat tool. And now Claude or ChatGPT, like, I set up your MCP server and my agent talks to your agent. That's literally, I'll have your people call my people or whatever, right? Like, and then let's also, like, same sort of idea. You've got a really big organization with a lot of different things that it can do. You're going to have little sub-agents for each parts of those pieces of the organization. And each one of these can be MCP server that communicates with all of the different pieces, and then just exposes a mechanism for communicating across those, effectively a chat tool. So for us frameworks, as far as React is concerned, I think that there are elements of like, well, okay, the bank is, even though it's a chat tool, maybe there is some mechanism for sharing some UI. I think that makes sense. Or like you're, showing a map or something like that, your Uber. And so they're like, we're still in that realm, but I think a lot of that agent stuff is going to be on the back end, and whether or not React frameworks kind of swallow that piece, I think is. I wouldn't say it's required, certainly, but I think it could be useful, and frameworks like to do useful things. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as we saw RSC kind of expand the scope and nature of React, right? Seems like there's a potential there, but it seems like more like a meta framework type deal.
I think maybe there's more for the native folks on that, like on-device LLMs. Like, that's the future that I want. So yeah, get to work, guys. Thanks.
I mean, Apple's on-device foundation model. You want to guess the context window size?
Very small, I imagine.
Yeah. It's like 4,000 characters.
Oh wow. Yeah. Well, you can make lots of sub-agents.
Yeah.
It'll get better. That's my expectation, is that it will improve.
Yeah, although this is like 4K is today. Like, let's imagine 2-3 years from that, and there's gonna be, like, most likely there's gonna be more progress here. Plus, nice thing about the local LLMs is that it's not that you only have to use the one provided by Expo, by Apple or Google, but you can just download your own, the one that you like to use MLC or Executor to run these models. So you're not like locked into this this particular choice that Apple made, but it's very efficient in terms of for as many apps as possible to use the same resources. So you, as an app developer, you don't really have to think about how much memory you're using, your app is using, and so on and so forth. So I think there is some pretty interesting future for the local LLMs. Also in terms of generating the UI that like hyper personal UI. So right now it would make likely more sense to handle that through the server, but with more powerful device, we can have like millions of versions of our own UI, and good luck testing that.
Yeah, mining Bitcoin, or whatever.
But it's gonna happen.
Like,
it's gonna happen.
Making crypto ads.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. All right, so we have a lot of members of the React team here. So what your meta framework authors and contributors, what do you want to see from React? Are there things that you want to see React take on? Always would have touched that one.
You did it. You did it. Good job.
Yeah.
Woo, we're done.
Yes. All right.
Cool.
Don't change suspense again, please.
Actually, speaking of changes, one thing when we were talking about making things easy for AI, not changing things makes things easier for AI. So that's a big challenge for frameworks as well, is like, how do I make it, actually Theo said this yesterday, how do you make it so that you can make changes to how it works without changing the API, so you can continue to improve it, but not change things.
Well, I think we're seeing some experimentation in shipping vibe rules. In fact, the package is called vibe rules with the packages as versioned resources. So, as a framework author, you can actually put in, okay, as we generate our docs, we're going to generate rules for LLMs and package it up so that it's in that version. So it's definitely evolving. So seeing some stuff in that space. All right.
Yeah, then you're asking your LLM to actually read the docs, and the developers are not doing that.
Well, sometimes they do a better job at it than we do.
Yeah, I guess they're getting lazy, right? So.
Yeah. No features for the React team at all?
Yeah, I mean,
is this like AI centric? Because that's kind of where we went, right? Or are we just back to just like, what do I want out of React?
Well, yeah, I decided like if there's folks that are like, AI, I'm done. I've seen a lot of this conference. Let's talk about React. And Kent was talking a lot about React. So yeah, let's talk about React. What are some stuff? Are there features in React that you think are missing, or that would be really cool to see? You would make your lives as meta framework authors easier?
Yeah, I would love to see.
Yeah.
So you can go, and then I'll go.
All right, it's not AI related, no worries. I would love to see more like burying the gap between the React and React Native. So what the teams showed today with more web APIs, better access to DOM, and this is making it easier for web developers to actually be productive in the mobile realm. So any effort in this area is like very welcome from my point of view. So I would love to have more web APIs, more like better CSS support. Great to see what Expo is exploring with CSS for React Native. I would love to have to be able to use the same animations and use view transitions in React Native. Right now it's not really possible. It's probably not going to be for the next couple of months, optimistically. So yeah, that's my wish list.
Cool. Tanner?
I saw a lot of talk this year about like performance and increasing performance of React, which is nice to hear at ReactConf, and that brought to the top of my mind, like as a framework author that's supporting not just React but multiple frameworks, I have to deal with React wanting to own more and more of my state so that I can use these awesome features like transitions and suspense and view transitions. And part of that discomfort there is the lack of something like a use external store. I know the React core team is probably going, oh, Tanner's asking for this again, but it really would allow me and the tools that my team builds to be able to take full advantage of all these awesome features of React, but also in a way that we could continue to own our data and own our architectures outside of React. That would be very cool. And I know that they're aware of that, but saying it out loud is, cathartic, so.
Nice, all right. Yeah, okay, so no one, yep, 10?
Can I just say one thing I think is interesting that none of us said: signals.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you got a point.
We're not done yet.
Is that true? Nobody, you're all fine with the render cycle as is?
I'm not going to ask for signals, but kind of in that vein is just more fine-grained performance. I know that we have React compiler, and that's amazing. And everybody should be working to like enable that by default. And as framework authors, we should be working to enable it by default. Good job, Evan. I'm working towards that. But also, I really do like expressive APIs that I can be deliberate about that kind of stuff. I've been like dreaming and salivating for a deep context selector type API for a long time. And if that was something that was native to React, again, I feel like it would offer a lot of control that I've missed and wanted, which is kind of there with signals, but I'm not asking for signals.
Yeah, you still get the render cycle, but you get that fine-grained granularity to pick off the data that makes sense to re-render on. Yeah. All right. Yeah.
And in fairness, we kind of simulate that in a lot of the TanStack tools. We allow for fine-grained selectors, but we can only do that because we use Sync External Store, which means we can't support completely the full like gamut of transitions and things like that. So I would like to not be at odds anymore with like fine-grained rendering support versus full transition support. I would love for just to be able to embrace all of it.
All right. Any closing thoughts? Got kind of running late on time, although, you jump in on how is Remix v3 going to just shake the apple cart tomorrow?
I have no idea what to
Friday?
expect on Friday, but y'all should tune in. I'm sure it'll be entertaining.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure they're
like a
putting
SpaceX launch. It
they're
could be really
slipping
entertaining.
some stuff in there just to get people upset, I think.
Yeah, possibly. Any final thoughts from anyone on the future of React?
I think it's worth punctuating one more time that like there is just a lot of convergence, and that's a good sign for React. It means that the stewardship over React is listening to us, listening to its users, and seeing the common threads. And I think that's the ultimate future we would all dream for, is that there is no meta framework. React is just, that's the tool that you need. Yeah. And I mean, that might be a pipe dream, but I think it's a good goal and something to keep in mind.
Do we think the foundation is going to help with that?
I think so.
I hope so, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, put React in the browser.
Okay. All right, can we get a big hand for all of our panelists? Thank you, guys.